Good morning again, and thank you very much. I would like to appreciate the presentations from my colleagues here that we're looking at the different aspects that influence our lives as farmers and also as stakeholders in the value chain. My name is Florence. I've met most of you. Some of you are meeting for the first time. Before I go into my presentation, I want to give just a synopsis into what this new animal is. Not necessarily new, but in the state that we are in, change does happen. So I'll just give a synopsis for about 30 seconds. That speaks to what is now the National Livestock Farmers Association, South Africa. Post-independence, 1994, and into 1996, that is the period when the National Emerging Red Meat Producers Organization was formed, which is a member of the Federation with the RPO. So those were the two organizations over the past 25 years that have shaped, advocated, and lobbied for policy change to actually structure developments in South Africa. So between the time of 1996 to about 2008, there was a genesis of other associations and forums, including the RMIF, the Red Meat Industry Forum, to respond to changes. And which are the changes that we're discussing this morning or presented this morning? Lobbying for frameworks that would enable farmers to be resilient or to be able to produce and meet up with the global and continental challenges that we face on a day-to-day basis. So when we look at the production systems, they are happening within the context of many circles. I hope I'm going to press the correct button, the middle one. Yes. The shaping of what we do or change that happens firstly has to align to the international vision. And the United Nations, it is what really directs the overall or the global environment in which we operate. Although it boils down to the farmer right at the end, alignment has to happen with the global institutions or the continental institutions in view of the fact that we are saying we need to export. So you cannot export unless if you are playing in the framework of what gives you that alignment. So at the moment we are working, everybody is knowingly or unknowingly working in alignment to the UN Sustainable Development Goals 2030. The metrics, though, show us that achieving the goals for zero poverty or zero hunger, income security, education, and all the other milestones, the 17 milestones, we are lagging behind. When we look at the red meat industry, we are also frantic and falling far short of reaching those targets. Out of that context, Africa Union, which is the body that governs us on the continent, works in what we call the Life to Africa program for the red meat industry. And the focus is here to say, for the continent to have sustainability in terms of food production, it must segment itself into regional options. In the eastern region, it must look at where its resources or potential lie. In the Southern African zone, which is SADC with 17 countries, there must be an alignment or a leading commodity where the resources and the assets have the best outcomes. So Africa Union does agreed to what Southern Africa chose, which was the red meat. So we are sitting in that context where on the continent, Southern Africa has the capacity and resources to produce and focus on the red meat component, which is cattle, sheep, and goats. So in terms of alignment with our government and national goals, we then sit in that sweet spot where we look at South Africa and we say it is a dry country. And certainly if your continental body has endorsed that Southern Africa be focused on the red meat industry, then we are in true alignment. And that then defines what we now find in the Agriculture Master Plan that was signed May 2022, that seeks to align the growth and push forward the red meat industry. Although the stats that were presented here indicates that beef is hardly pushing that mark. I don't know if we're even exporting at 2%. So we have all the policies and frameworks aligned to support the growth in that aspect, and yet the structures are not quite there to actually go with that change. In the space where we are playing now is the associations or commodities, NEPO or the National Livestock Farmers Association, and the RPO. We play in this component where we are looking at how our value chain can be resilient. And our alignment is through inclusive development or value chain access, to say if we do not have access in the value chain, certainly will not be sustainable beyond 2030. And of course, at the center of it, there is the farmer whose vision and goals are about today. They may not be as long-term, 2063, but they are about sustainability today and also in 100 years to come. So if we look at the master plan, what is embedded in it that is coming from the red meat industry is saying we are looking at a growth of about 8.3 billion just coming from the beef sector. And if we add the sheep and goats per year, this is additional growth, 12 billion to the current. And this is driven by an increase in stock that must come from the emerging or developing sector. Because the ones that are already commercialized, you can only move so far. Maybe you can push 2, 3, 4% or 10% at most, applying the tools, management tools that you need. But there is immense growth that is still to be unlocked within the context of the constituents of the developing farmer. So that's really change that is directed by metrics. And these metrics are driven by the resources that are there. An inventory or an audit of those resources shows that this is the possibility, if that we could, by 2030, be pushing at about 12 billion additional to what is current. And the current we indicated is 2%. Our allocations in terms of the income that can be driven is mostly based on the carcass. The leather industry and other byproducts are not well captured because much of this data is off the mark with regard to accuracy. So if all these other components, the 4 components, could be added into that $12 billion value, I think we are looking at a much bigger context. So we need the statistics. That's what is lacking. There's no data, as you will see, in terms of what we have is assets within the developing sector and the commercialized sector. The statistics from FAO, the Food and Agriculture Organization, just indicate that our offtake is about 26% for beef, about 25% with sheep, and also 15% with goats. Considering that within Southern Africa, South Africa has, I think, the second largest herd of goats after Tanzania. Certainly this number can be improved if there is change that can happen within the goat value chain, institutionalization and development of the goat value chain, extremely underdeveloped in this country. What are the drivers? There are three components where our production is coming from. In terms of percentages that I've indicated here, this is relative to the asset itself, the animals, the stock. So there is a balance, almost a balance between commercial and the communal sector in terms of the numbers. Bigger differences in terms of diversity. And where change is expected to happen, both at national level in terms of our strategic objectives within master plan, is within this sector, the developing sector. And that developing sector is made out of mostly the agro-pastoralists, people that are sedentary, but they will crop and graze their animals either within the scope of their environment or take them maybe 10 kilometers, 20 kilometers, as in Limpopo, where the herders will go and stay in the grazing areas for maybe a month and then come back home and change. And then we also have the limited transhumance, which happens in the Northern Cape mostly, Springbok area, and also the Lillyfontein area where farmers move between seasons. So these are our key drivers, the two components, but we really need to take cognizance of limited transhumance where production is linked to cultural practices. And there is a growing body within the Africa Union that says transhumance must be promoted so that people do not lose the culture or their lifestyle because they have to be streamlined with commercial practices that we are pushing for them. In terms of the positives, the very diverse genetic pool and our diverse production environments enable us to tap into the various components of production systems. But our biggest issue is now with the restriction to access production resources or to access the value chain, especially for the developing farmers. Accessing finances, accessing land, water, and accessing knowledge systems. I think I've spoken to this slide, I'll pass. What I have here is just a graph that is illustrating how the red meat industry, through the facilitating organ, RMIS, Red Meat Industry Services, has looked at the structure to possibly manage the alignment or manage our implementation programs where we have at production level in the base of the value chain, the drivers are mostly the commodity organizations, and also you can see Stanbook is here, and also LRF, which has been supporting capacity development. And then as you move into trading, we have the middle persons that are here, and I think I heard something about how can we shorten this value chain. It's very long. So between the producer to here where processing and trading is happening, there is too many hands, and hence you end up with a lower price here and the price is triple at this end. So what needs to happen is to see where the farmer can cut the value chain, not shortcut, but have a shorter value chain, maybe 3 components instead of 5 components to run through this value chain. In this slide, I've just picked out a component that is coming out from the master plan, understanding that this is a strategy document that is driven by the current policies to say, how do we get to where we want to go? So this is mostly looking at pillar number 3 that says, there is a need to increase the winner calf intake from the small to medium and communal producers by about 250,000 winners every year, and that target must be reached by 2030. As we are at 2024 now, we are looking at maybe 5 seasons. How do we drive an additional 250,000 winners to come out of the smallholder sector? So this is where my call for resilience is coming through. The need for change in the structure. Although we have a roadmap here in terms of the red meat industry that says we are here already, We've passed 2023 and we are in this component of the journey where there is implementation in terms of structural change, which I will allude to in terms of our Black constituency, the traceability systems, compartmentalization, dealing with animal health, and especially the issues on FMD and also exports. So we have a 3 years period to deal with these particular components. So there is constant change here that needs to happen, and change at farm level, change at institutional level, and changes that may need to happen at national and continental level to be able to achieve the 2030 goals that are in the NDP, the master plan, and also the SDGs as driven by the UN. Our chaos comes from the lack of design clarity. We do not have one design that can take us to the goals. As we sit, though we've got the Red Meat Industry Forum, it's designing its own pathway to get there. We have the commodities like ourselves designing our own pathway. We have RPO designing a different pathway. The DELRAD agriculture has another pathway, and the rural development has another pathway, which is working on the presidential stimulus approach, or I think the PLUS program, which is active now. I think with the livestock sector, it might be looking at $1 billion that is being funded for red meat. And then we have private initiatives that are also running through. So there really is lack of design clarity, and there is no logical framework that is succinct that can carry us to achieve the Vision 2030. We have issues on political changes, the political climate. The biggest one is the economic changes, and also the social dynamics that are associated with lack of access. Most of them, we will not be discussing them, but we are seeing a rise in non-communicable diseases, chronic conditions of high blood pressure, cancers. We are seeing an increase in disability, increases in terms of drug abuse, and of course, lately we are seeing an almost out of control lawlessness in terms of stock theft in the country. So with all these noises, something has to come in to structure it, and that must begin with you and me. And from our side as a commodity, as the National Livestock Farmers Association, we are saying we are going back to basics, and hence NEPO rebranded to align itself to the district development model that then feeds into the provincial and the national level. I do not have enough time to really go into this, but I would like to discuss them once we have the panel discussion coming forth. So this is about structuring. There is much to say. Farmers must do this. Farmers, you must catch on. I think we need AI actually to deal with the must do list that keeps falling on our places. Most of us are not intelligible enough to really sink in the data on metrics, meteorological data, and then sink in the policy issues, and then sink in that. So we are actually sitting and saying, maybe AI has become our best bet, but we need to be structured. The developing farmers need structure at district model, level. That can then intersect with mentors, with organizations, private sectors that need to support them to be able to unlock the 250. So we've got a goal and a target, but we need structure that must come from within. So that is our focus, to build resilience, restructure, and no longer be a ragtag army, individualistic, where each member wants to outdo the next one. It's no longer individual membership, but we are looking at structured district constituencies that have a business approach or a business model that drives development. I would like to stop here and entertain questions during the panel discussion. Thank you very much.